We are live with
All right.
Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. This is live broadcast. Anything can happen.
And often does.
Yes, it
It
does.
does.
So we are live. It's another Friday, your Friday evening habit during COVID while you're shut in, and because people like Mark Elric doesn't want people to go out, and you can't serve drinks after 10 p.m. and all the other craziness. And then
We
people
are
like
live.
Baby Doc.
This is the last time we let Dwight
Yeah,
do the
Dr.
introduction.
Politics.
I was
Yeah,
going to
what
say,
was that?
here's the whole thing. Here's the whole thing.
Anything can
When
happen.
was the last time Dwight had a drink after 10 o'clock? I mean, those who know Dwight know he's like in bed by 9 p.m.
9:15, 10 o'clock.
9:15, okay.
Officially,
All right.
the
So,
Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. I'm Jackie Saxton, and I'm joined tonight by Dwight Patel, Mark Unkefer, Don Irvine, and Marcus Alzona. Now,
all
we-
right.
Now
Now we can go.
That's a professional way to do it, okay?
Hey,
Thank
look,
you.
This is nobody's ever said this is a professional show. We're not a polished, we're not CNN where we do these fine polished shows and all that stuff.
Well,
You know.
But how are we going to
gonna
move to
raise
the
the
next
bar.
level
That's
if
true.
we don't
How
polish
do
the
we
show?
get? How do we get the weekend slot of the 5 on Fox? You know, or the 6
right.
at 6. You know,
we need
we're the
crap.
we're the farm team for the 5.
This is a pretty good group. Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Don't sell yourself short or anything
I
like that.
really
We can
did.
work on this.
I said we're the farm
All right.
team for the 5.
All right. Let's go. I mean,
Yeah.
so standard
Busy
thing
Tuesday.
here is that we are now 88 days until the election. Now the caveat is here with the I'm talking about election day, not necessarily that the fact that we have early voting, which actually means people are going to be voting substantially far in advance of election day. So something to be we'll talk about as we get into mail-in voting and some other issues here a little bit here later in the program. All right. So today we had more economic news because it continues to dominate the news cycle
Great
in one
economic
sense.
news.
It was good. I'm not sure it was great, but it was above expectations. So we had 1.8 million jobs created. The expectations were for 1.48 million, and we had an unemployment rate that dropped to 10.2%. So it's getting right close to that 10% rate that a lot of people thought it would be at. It would stay at by the election. We do have 2 more unemployment reports coming before the election, so it could dip even further. But I mean, we also know at the same time is that we're seeing a little bit of a flattening of the economy because the economy's kind of slowed down. A lot of stores, shops, restaurants open, but then we're forced to close. The beaches, that kind of thing that we've talked about before too. So, how much of an impact are these numbers going to have on the election? What are you looking at going forward? Is it going to get better? And is it going to help hurt Trump?
Well, I'll tell you why I say these are great numbers, because when people at MSNBC and CNN and other people in the wacky lefty media say the president got a preview on these numbers because he made a comment there are going to be some fabulous numbers coming out, then when the numbers come out, great. And they're all saying, did you guys give him like a tip-off, as they've been saying all day today. But I think what this means is, one, it's not good news for the Biden campaign, frankly. And I think people understand at the end of the day that, one, jobs, jobs, jobs. And you know something? Who do they trust more on delivering, on fixing, getting us out of this post-COVID and rebuilding the economy? President Trump or creepy Joe Biden, who under his 8 years of regime basically had the numbers that President Trump has today? And they were saying how they were great numbers for the Obama-Biden regime, and now all of a sudden these are just horrible. I mean, come on, a pandemic to bring us back to the Obama regime numbers.
Yeah, Dwight's 100% right. I mean, one of the things that people have been talking about is which of these 2 people do you trust to lead us out of the recession that could come from what happened during COVID? And if we're seeing that Trump is, improving the economy back to where it was pre-COVID, before COVID is even totally gone, which who knows when that will be, then the answer is obviously, well, we should stick with the guy who's already getting us back to where we were. If the 2 big issues, and I've been saying this for a while, the 2 big issues that are going to be critical in this election are going to be the economy and systemic racism and racial justice.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that they have just. Let me tell you, the Democratic Party is. Have you guys heard the story about the little boy that cried wolf? The Democrat Party is the little party that cried racism. They have cheapened racism. There is real racism out there, and it's an ugly thing. But the Democrat Party has cheapened racism to nobody even thinks twice. Now, when you scream racism, oh, it's just another Democrat. It must be Tuesday if they're calling somebody a racist, you know. And
well, we'll get into it later, but honestly, we're seeing more and more instances of the racism coming from the left, and honestly, from Joe Biden in particular. If you watch the TV.
Yeah, you know, he can't go into a Dunkin' Donuts in his hometown without hearing an Indian accent.
But back to what Jackie was saying in terms of, you know, the economy being an important issue, and where, you know, how important these things are going to be, you know, also to Dwight's point there too. But, you know, one of my questions here would be is that, you know, maybe the economy's getting better. Maybe that's the message. It's a good thing for Trump overall. But is the voting public, are they getting that message? Are they believing that message? Are they going to understand that message come November or come mid-September or whenever, when people start to vote early or can start mailing in their ballots?
I think people are still very much shell-shocked by what we've gone through. And I mean, let's be honest that when 10% is a good unemployment, 10.2% is a good unemployment number. Now, obviously, that's relative to where we were, but it's also in comparison to where we were in January or February. We're in a world of unreality where it's kind of hard to figure out how people factor that out. I think what's really important is leadership and people. Jackie talked about who do you think is going to run the economy? Who's going to go forward? And Joe Biden is running. How shall I say? He's running a rope-a-dope campaign, trying to avoid out there. Even every time he goes out there, he creates more problems for him. But he's trying to make Trump the issue and avoid stepping forward. Now, the question will be whether or not come the fall, that's a message that really resonates.
Yeah, it seems like that Biden's Trump's plan or his general strategy, like if you look at what he's trying to do at a high level, like I would assume a larger number of the public would see he's trying to open up the economy as much as he can, given restrictions and given different changing data as new data comes in and adjusting. Whereas Biden's strategy seems to be, let's lock down as long as possible, and that ties in with maybe some of the criticisms that Dwight was saying about, you know, how do you structure these things going forward, such that we're emphasizing restarting the economy, getting people safely back to work, getting the whole economy and the whole society functioning at least quasi-normally again, versus if you're focused always on, well, let's just keep everything locked down.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Jackie.
I was going to say, it's also going to depend on what are the memories like of the American voters. So a lot of them have that longer memory of, okay, let's consider what life was like in the Obama era versus what was life like in the first 3 years of the Trump presidency, or are they just going to be focused on what happened once once COVID hit, or what happened once the primary campaign started? You know, it's what people are thinking about.
So a couple of my concerns here, though, is just that one is that there's evidence of permanent job losses. I mean, because of bankruptcies and other things, and we're probably going to see more of jobs that aren't going to come back. The second part of that is that not only is it from the permanent job losses, but for those that are at least still on furlough or still waiting to return to work in states like, you know, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, where, you know, Trump won, but he didn't win by huge margins. How much of an effect will that have?
I want to say address the bankruptcy stuff. You know, first of all, I mean, we've seen companies come and go, TWA, Pan Am, Eastern Airlines. We've seen McDonnell Douglas go away. We've seen, you know.
I saw the airline industry.
McDonnell Douglas actually was bought. Let's be clear.
Yeah, they're bought by Boeing, but they're gone, you know. But my
It's not
point
quite
is
the same thing.
my
Yeah.
point is
Yes.
my point is this: is that you know, people talk about, they point to needless markup and J.C. Penney and Sears. They were already in trouble prior to this. You know, the bigger and there'll be somebody else that'll come. I mean, remember when Kmart and Two Guys were like the big retailers around town in Ames, and they're gone. They've been replaced by Walmart and Target. There'll be another.
But Dwight, I
business
think
that'll
that
come
what
in
Don's
place.
referring to is less about these big box stores and whatever. We're seeing a decline anyway, because we're seeing a larger shift towards, e-stores and online retail, but more so the smaller businesses, local
Exactly.
restaurants. I
And
think
if-
that's something that like 25 to 50% of all restaurants are going to close during the
And
pandemic.
here's the thing: and if those people think they're going to get a better deal under voting for Joe Biden, they may as well just shut their doors. The day Biden wins, because something, he's going to tax them. He's going to regulate.
We already. I think you raise a great point when you look at the details. Now, right now, there's a food fight going on in Washington. No recess yet because they're having a food fight over.
I don't get August off. Why should they?
One of the demands, but let me make the point though. One of the demands that Pelosi and Schumer have is to take the 2017 tax cut and repeal it, which would obviously increase taxes. And I'd love to hear, I mean, it's kind of buried in the details, and she kind of describes it, well, we want this much money, but if we were able to raise taxes, it wouldn't be that much money. Well, the bottom line is she's asking for, in her negotiation, a tax cut. And this is something there ought to be a conversation, because I think if people understand that raising taxes is not a good solution in the middle of an economic challenge like we're having now.
As President George H.W. Bush said, we can't tax ourselves into prosperity. It's never happened. It never will. When you take money out of one pocket to put it into another pocket, you got to create wealth. And the way you create wealth is by cutting taxes and giving incentives. Use Jack Kemp's enterprise zones. That's what they need to do, and that's what the president understands. He understands hub zones. He understands enterprise zones, and that's what's going to get us back moving. And we'll have new small business that'll come in that'll replace the old businesses that have gone away. Just like we have Southwest Airlines instead of Eastern Airlines.
And also, we were talking about this before the show, and also on previous shows, about what would a good solution be. And Dwight kept pitching the idea of a payroll tax cut. Raising taxes for the same reason that a payroll tax cut won't work, raising taxes also won't work. People don't have money coming in. If you're taxing at the same tax bracket, it's less money coming in. It's raising taxes on people who already don't have the money to give you isn't going to help anybody.
Mm-hmm. And also, every time they raise taxes, the money that comes into Washington goes down. They see that little spike, but then you're not, because what happens when here's the problem. It's kind of like Milton Friedman's economy of a pencil. You raise, let's say, a tax, $1, raise taxes by $1, or even like say 10 cents when General Motors saying we're going to charge you 10 cents on every dollar you bring in. That you've just put probably thousands of auto workers out of work, because something, General Motors doesn't print that money over in their Flint, Michigan plant. I know people at Department of Treasury seem to be printing a lot of money in their basement, but GM needs to find the money, and what they need to do is they need to cut costs, and basically raising tax will put people on the unemployment lines, just like when it'll go back to the days of Jimmy Carter, and you can't raise taxes. Raising taxes will never create a single job, but it will eliminate thousands.
Yeah, so that's maybe one of the things we were going to discuss ahead, but we just link it now about New York and raising taxes in New York City and in the state of New York with Cuomo and de Blasio. If that's sort of like an example of it, whereas if you raise taxes locally or raise taxes in those areas, people end up leaving, and now if you do it at a national level, you could hurt the U.S. economy. And I feel like even with a lot of things going on, I think a lot of people around the world, as far as like businesses, they think that the U.S. is a good place to do, or at least relatively good place to do business. And so, whereas I believe it's the European, a lot of the international markets tanked, but the U.S. hasn't, because they have more confidence in the United States economy and the current leadership about, you know, the sort of economic stability and the pathway to recovery.
You may have come very close to putting your finger on what is one of the real priorities of Chuck Schumer from New York and Nancy Pelosi from California, who both represent the two highest tax jurisdiction. They would dearly, dearly, dearly love to be able to get rid of the $25,000 exemption cap, which affects the state and local tax deduction that used to essentially allow the rest of the country to subsidize New York and California. And they are desperate to be able to do that. And it's fascinating because when you listen to them, it's the exact same argument that you're all making, which is, oh my goodness, if the tax rates are so much higher in New York and California because we don't have the deduction, well, people will leave the states. And that's exactly right. I mean, they have been leaving the state.
I mean, look at Con Edison. They left, not Con Edison. There's several businesses have left the great state of New York. You know, they've gone to greener pastures. They've gone down to North Carolina. They've gone to Florida. They've gone, you know, a lot of these businesses are moving to right to work states. There were tax and regulation. I mean, look at all the businesses that are leaving California. Elon Musk is about to move his plant from California and built a new one in Texas, you know, where, one, he doesn't deal with unions. He doesn't have to deal with all the regulations and all the nutty California emission standards and all that, even though he has zero emission cars, so that doesn't affect him. But still, you know, the carbon footprint of his factories and all that doesn't matter, you know, much to them. And things in Texas are good for business, you know, just like states, you know, that basically, if you look at a red state, it's actually better for business than a blue state. Blue states are usually high tax, over-regulated, and you're basically being told how to conduct business day in, day out, and why any good business or good CEO or CFO of any corp, why would you want to be in the state of New York? I mean, you had de Blasio today saying, come back. We need your money. You know, how about you lower the taxes and people come back? Why don't you get rid of your special taxes on hotel stays in New York City? You know, if you know.
I want to say, like with New York, I mean, one of the things of, especially the large urban areas, one of the attractions is, I want to say, just the city environment, the nightlife, and being able to go out and be in the middle of things. That's all shut down. Yeah. So why stay there if the reason for being in the city and also the connections, like, so if all the different corporate headquarters or the meetings that you'd go to, it's one thing in years past, it's like, oh, I'll call in or I'll attend remotely. Well, everyone's attending remotely now, so it's no reason to be in these cities. And to some degree, these cities are dying. Yeah. I mean, aren't they? That's what's going on. It's like Detroit, like, after everything started moving out, or are we living sort of the movie The Joker? Like, it's like the 70s repeated again in 2020 you know, for New York, like, or Escape from New York.
Well, let me say this. I love New York. It's a great town. It's a, you know, people ride around in a hole in the ground. It's a great place. I love the city. It's awesome, you know. But I'll tell you this. I'd go to New York more often if I'd have to pay a special tax when I stay at a hotel in Manhattan, or when I want to go see a show. I mean, you can't see a show now, but although MTV is allowed to do their award show in New York City, evidently.
I'd go if they let you rent an Airbnb, but that's the regulatory.
They don't let you do that either.
Yeah, I know.
And but I mean, there's, I mean, I'd much rather where I could where I, you know, it's like, it's a fun town, but my point is, they overregulate you, they tax you to death. I mean, what do you think the price of a Broadway show would be if they got rid of the entertainment tax? Which
I mean, look, I'm a Broadway junkie, and Broadway will always hold a special place in my heart. But you know, it is expensive to see a show. You know, my dad and I would go every single year. We'd see 2 shows, but and 2 shows for 2 people. That's easily you can drop $1,000 on
Yeah.
that.
I mean, and it's like, you could go to you could go down to, it's like New York. New Yorkers will buy their big ticket items. They'll go to New Jersey because there's less sales tax in New Jersey. They'll go to New Jersey to buy. Kind of like in Maryland, we all go to Delaware, Pennsylvania to buy stuff. Pennsylvania has no sales tax on clothing purchase. Like
And then Dwight files the use tax form, right?
Yeah, you're
absolutely.
right, exactly.
That is the
Just
right
like the
thing to
rest
do.
of us.
It's
So
the
I
right
just want you to
thing
know,
do.
Peter Francho has is downloading this video, and he's going to be sending. What's his name? Len Foxwell will be sending
Well,
Dwight personally.
well, Lenny.
A bill.
Lenny, I pay more than my fair share of tax in this great state of Maryland because we've got a Republican governor, and your boss will never be governor of this state.
Sorry for the digression there.
Well,
I couldn't
let-
resist.
What else are we talking about tonight?
No, I mean, before we finish off this point, though, I mean, I will say on the SALT tax, state and local income tax deduction, when they put that into effect, I mean, I thought, okay, New York and California, obviously, wealthy people are going to get hit really hard. What surprised me is that when I tried to itemize taxes, I found out that with my, middle class income, I got hit with that too, because the property taxes and the income tax between that, it's like I was over, and I had not even thought about it. I didn't even think that was a possibility, and I was not a happy camper with that at all. And yet we're not considered to be. I mean, we're not a low tax state, but I don't think we're necessarily, we're not necessarily in the California, New York realm, but we're but it's interesting. It's interesting to see.
We're actually
Top
here in
10.
Montgomery County. We're above. Again, we've talked about New York City, but we are, depending on income levels and what have you, our tax rates in Maryland are higher than it is in large parts or most parts of New York State.
I mean, Nassau
Depending
County.
on income.
I want to say Montgomery County seems to be a higher tax jurisdiction than Nassau County, although that's going to change because Nassau County is now run by a bunch of bloodthirsty leeches.
Yeah, I mean
Democrats.
that is an issue. Now, to be fair, then Nassau County, I love Nassau. They're just the tax and spend Republicans up there. they got what they deserve.
Joe's
But,
taping this from his ambassadorial.
I'm sure
residency.
he is. They also have very, very high property taxes.
You might get an elephant tax.
Well, I want to say one more thing, and then we can move on here, and you can comment. Obviously, is that when we talk about this spat between De Blasio and Cuomo, I mean, I thought it was interesting because De Blasio, I mean, he was really kind of needling Cuomo. It was like, oh, Cuomo's got all those rich friends in the Hamptons, and De Blasio is making this big deal about, well, we need to have them pay taxes, if they come back, unless the federal government is going to plug our budget hole, right? Yes, great. That's
Yes.
exactly what we want to do, is plug every single budget hole in every single state because of COVID or whatever.
What is it?
And
what
that
is
is exactly what is on Pelosi's wish list. And part of her whatever is to say, we'll increase federal taxes, and we'll then make that fill in that gap.
And she's defending that. She had that little interview with Judy Woodruff, and Judy Woodruff asked her that question. Kind of asked her about the complaints, some of the criticism about the Democrats and the bill, and Pelosi just erupted in the sense of, it's like, well, she accused Judy Woodruff of all people of being an advocate for the GOP. It's like, I have never heard that. I have never considered Judy Woodruff as somebody to ever be considered as an advocate for the GOP. And when Judy Woodruff said, I'm playing the devil's advocate, and Nancy Pelosi's like, oh, no, you're not. And she's accusing the Republicans of like, they're not going to give enough to the state and local governments, right? Which goes back to your point about what they're trying to do with it. The Republicans, at least in this case, are trying to stand up and say, look, we've got $1 trillion. The Democrats want to spend $3.5 trillion. We've got to come to some kind of agreement. The Republicans really don't want to spend $1 trillion, but we need to do something because we're still kind of suffering.
And let's put this in context for Maryland, which is that, so last month, I guess, or June, I'm trying to remember the exact timing, we projected about a $1.9 billion shortfall for the 2021. And Governor Hogan took on cuts, spending cuts of roughly 1.4 billion. So basically came up with a plan to address 3/4 of the shortfall. More needs to be done. We really don't know what the precise numbers
I got
will
a
be.
silver lining in all this for you, Mark.
So I was going to say that here's the thing: is you want governors like Hogan to do what is the responsible thing to make adjustments to the budget, and if you hold out the idea that, well, gee, you're just going to get it all filled in by the federal government, you're just kicking the can down the road. I'm sorry, Dwight. I wanted
Yeah, I
to
was
finish.
saying there is a silver lining in this thing for the great state of Maryland. Guess what? Kerwin is dead on arrival now. They have no money to fund Kerwin, so we're done with Kerwin.
Well, I may have a thing or two to say in the next week about that.
But I mean, here's the thing about but the liberals, when it comes down to this thing, is that when they should be doing the responsible thing, whether or not it's the local county executive or the governor or whatever about these budget deficits, these problems have been created. But instead, what they tend to do is they tend to go in front of the TV cameras and say, we can't cut because all these vital programs. No, you can figure this out if you really, really want to. But the last thing the Democrats want to do, as we all know, is cut any kind of program. They are known to give and give and give our money away to everybody else, and then they build these expectations, and then you get to a point where it's really hard for anybody to come in there and cut. If a Republican tries to come in there and do the responsible thing and cut, well, they're going to get thrown out on their keister the next time the election comes up.
I've got some really good cuts, I can recommend to our friends in Annapolis, because Senator Huff is watching. Here's the thing: public schools, right? We are okay if they're going to do all virtual, right? Why are we going to pay to heat them and pay for the electricity? Why don't we, I'm not saying turn off the heat and have burst pipes, but you can still keep the heat down, turn the lights off. Don't pay for snow removal in the parking lot when it snows.
But listen, Dwight, most 80% of the expense for the school system is in personnel costs.
Well, I mean,
basically salaries.
Can we furlough some of the administrators? Really.
Let me go there. So one of the issues is if the school is going to transition into more virtual training, the availability is that basically the curriculum, which is relatively standardized. So there is day number 114, which is different from class to classroom, but basically covers the same material. Mm-hmm. Then that basically day number 114 can be placed on video if that's for that portion of the education that's going to be handled that way, and teachers available to provide for extra help and support, and maybe in effect a kind of lab class to be able to work with it. But much of that is, in effect, we no longer have to have a ratio of one teacher per X number of students. We can make these videos available, and you know what happens if we've got teachers that are not available, then we may need to have layoffs. We may need to have a across the board cut, and it won't affect. Frankly, it won't affect the education until we're back in school. Yeah, and it frankly would probably create an incentive for getting people back in the classrooms.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Mark. It's like, why are we? Do we really need to be spending all this money on? On top of that, administrators. I mean, do we need to have all these administrators working that are basically, honestly, why should they be immune and why should they be immune from the suffering that everyday Americans,
I have 2 words for you: teachers unions.
Yep. By the way, in Montgomery County, the teachers unions were protesting the Verizon and Comcast stores because they're demanding free internet access for them or a reduced rate. And I'm like, you were paying for internet at your house before this is happening, and I know you are, because I don't think most teachers do have internet at their homes, and they were paying for it beforehand. Now they want it subsidized by, so that's just going to mean my FiOS bills are going to go up because you guys want cheap internet? I don't think so.
Well, I want to throw this out because this has been bothering me, I've been trying to think about this and trying to ask some people questions about this, and you're you're an excellent group to ask this question, which on the education side, if we talk about the teachers, a potential reduced role of teaching, or maybe not, what about the property taxes? Yeah,
They
right.
should go down.
Right, but how? What's the odds of that?
Yeah, what are the odds
Zero.
that? So let's Don, you raise a great point here, right? Because we're hearing about a quote rent moratorium, right? Or I should say, well, there's actually
Yeah,
rent
rent-
moratorium
they-
and eviction moratorium, right?
And they also want rent forgiveness.
And
Well,
okay.
basically same thing.
all that. So here's the question: is Montgomery County willing to forego its real estate property taxes due in October and December? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
They should.
I don't think so.
They should, though. Let me tell you something. I think we should all just deduct 20% from our tax bill and just send them their bill 20% less, because they don't need that money. I mean, honestly, our property. I've seen my.
Twice
I don't
gonna go
think that's
away.
going to work.
I just only give you 80% because you don't need the extra 20%.
They say that when they tax us, they're saying we don't need 100% of our salaries. You just take be happy with 60%, give us 40% back.
Can I explain what
taxes.
happens when you do that, Dwight?
Yeah, I know what happens.
It's called liens.
Yes. Yes. No, but it'd be nice if King Elric would get out of his Tonal Park bungalow and basically say let's give everyone 20% off. And you can.
Well,
you
but
can
real,
send me
yeah,
a-
but real. I mean, let's be real. It's going to be a little tough in the current environment to do those kinds of taxes. I think it's just really a recognition that there is, you cannot relieve everything. We've got to be able to do some kind of triage. And the challenge of letting, of delaying obligations, of putting them off down the road, just means that 6 months or 9 months or whenever, we're really going to be looking at an economic catastrophe, because if people have stopped paying rent for 6 months, they're not going to have the money to bring themselves whole.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to something. I know that we will also have there's also another catastrophe in waiting. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, and that is the mail-in voting, but it continues to be a top-line subject because of so many moving parts, so many things that are happening. I read in the New York Post the other day about they had looked at 403,000 presidential primary ballots in New York, and out of those 403,000 mail-in ballots, 84,000 were disqualified. So about 20% of the votes that were cast, mailed in, were thrown out for one reason or another, which also created a huge amount of dispute and argument and everything like this. Probably something to the order of why it took them 6 weeks to finally say Carolyn Maloney won her race in New York for Congress, in that primary. But, we're only talking about 403,000 votes. If you look at the presidential election, what is it, 140, 150 million votes? What is this saying? Even if you took that 20% and say it's only going to be 5%, that's still like 7 million, 7.5 million people. This is a problem.
Yeah, the election, unless it is a landslide in either direction, it will not be resolved by election day. There's going to be how many tens of millions of ballots that are not counted yet, that are sitting out there. It is going to be, it's going to be madness. I mean, at least based upon this and a lot of other signals that have been coming out, how can you really do this? I mean, the practical implementation of this is going to be crazy. And then you're going to have multiple states saying, well, we have to wait until the popular vote's in, because then we need to figure out how we're going to send our electors in.
So one of the problems in New York was this idea of having a postmark on the ballots. And I think there was a cutoff time for when ballots could be sent in if they, and it had to be reflected the postmark. Problem is they were business reply envelopes, as we've talked about, and those aren't postmarked. So there were all these ballots that arrive at the Board of Elections for which they had no postmark.
Here's a novel concept I've got. I mean, Don, you and I, we go to Costco's, and with my gray hair, I get to get in on senior hours, right?
You're sneaking in early. We're going to out you on this. Is there somebody from Costco watching this?
You look younger than I do, Don.
He goes to the Costco in Delaware, right? Because no sales tax.
No, I actually go to the one in Wheaton because they actually have a decent selection of stuff, and I get in there in the senior hour, and parking's really good.
Just by the way, they said they're going to keep the senior hours every Monday through Friday instead of just Tuesday and Thursday.
I like that. I really do like that because I can go in there. But Gil Davis, I was having this conversation. Gil Davis ran for Attorney General in Virginia in 1997. Gil Davis said, I should hire you on the spot, but you just don't have enough gray hair to do this. People aren't going to take this.
What does that have to?
Something? The gray hair is not letting me get into Costco's.
Well, I don't know how much they actually enforce senior hours at these stores because I would go to during what was quote unquote senior hours when I would walk to Harris Teeter to get my groceries, and I hopefully don't look like I'm old enough to be using senior hours, and that no one's ever stopped me. But
Costco's they do. Costco's they got a guy.
Wait, Costco and mail-in voting are not the same.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly. Where did we go with that? I don't know.
My point is this.
Yeah,
please,
we're waiting.
we'd like to hear this.
If we can go into the big box stores with a mask on, why can't we go to the polls and vote with a mask on? That is my point.
We have made that point. But going back to the mail-in voting thing, I've been having this conversation with my dad a lot. We've been talking about, and he's been saying, look, if the election comes in, it's mostly mail-in voting, and it's very close, and then they find 20,000 ballots or just enough ballots in a warehouse in Pennsylvania somewhere, just enough for Biden to push him over the edge to beat Trump, it looks really suspicious. And obviously the Trump campaign is going to say, whoa, 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 we're challenging that, or vice versa, and rightfully so. But then Don had mentioned, or Market said, unless it's a landslide, then we don't know. Honestly, I think if it's a landslide, it also looks just as sketchy. And I think that the truth of the matter is there's just no trust in that doing an all mail-in. I think it's going to get challenged no matter what the outcome is.
Well, it's a good thing we've got majorities on the Supreme Court if it goes there.
Right. Well, I'm not saying that's not what the outcome is going to be, but I think no matter what happens, if we have a predominantly mail-in election, it's going to get challenged either way, and it's going to be a long, long time before we actually have an answer.
And there's still questions about, I think there's a lot of people that are coming to the realization that the mail, the U.S. Postal Service is a problem.
Yes.
That, that you really don't know what's happening with your ballot once you put it in the mail. Now, they also, a lot of municipalities, a lot of places have decided to set up these postal-like boxes, which are ballot collection boxes. I think we've seen them in Frederick and other places.
Yeah, no one can break into those, Don.
And they're supposed to be, monitored or guarded. Exactly who's doing this, and then who's picking those up, and how is that being transported? I find that to be a little bit disconcerting. Now, I had an interesting conversation with Liz Mattori today, and she was talking about, she says, blacks, she says, in general, they don't trust the post office. The reason that you see these long lines, on election day at polls, and you see, actually, and she's right. A lot of them are black people lined up, whether it's St. Louis, Atlanta, Baltimore, wherever, because they want to see that their vote is being cast because they don't trust the system. No matter what the Democrats tell them, they still want to be there and do that. So I thought it was kind of interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it until she had mentioned it, but it started to make a lot of sense to me that, you have a group of people that are traditionally in the Democrat camp, but they also have a real problem with this mail-in ballot, voting type of a thing. And it is, Trump has talked about it. I think he tweeted, this could take weeks or take years. It won't take years to resolve the election, but it could take a long time. That yes, will we know by the end of November? Not necessarily. Will we know by the beginning of December? Will we know by Christmas? Depending on how that vote turns out, it could just be till sometime in January. Who knows?
Hey, Don, does the left understand that who gets to be president until they decide who wins president? they really,
Well,
here's
Trump stays in office until January of 2020.
or
you know,
June or 20.
you know, he doesn't have to do, but he won't have to go. I mean, at that point, they'll resolve it before the inauguration day for sure.
Yes.
But it's still going to be one huge mess. Now, I heard and I didn't see, and so maybe somebody here on the panel knows. They were supposed to announce what was going to happen in Maryland because Governor Hogan wanted polling places open. There was a lot of pushback about COVID and all this stuff. That's not safe. Did they make that? Did they issue the decision as to what we're doing here in Maryland?
I
Does anybody
heard
know?
the Wednesday night. I heard that we are going to be mail-in ballots, thanks to our friend P.J. Hogan. Remember P.J. Hogan, the Republican from District 39, who basically took a bribe and became a Democrat because they offered him a really nice committee appointment.
No,
Yeah, P.J.
I
Hogan.
saw-
We know who you are. Connie Morales, Chief of Staff. P.J. Hogan. Yeah, we remember when you got elected as a Republican. But he is on the board of elections, state board of elections, or whatever. And he was one of those people, that is like they were taking a vote, and he was going, "Oh, it's good to have a mail-in. Every vote counts. PJ, go pound sand. What happened to your boss who decided to be nice to the Democrats?
So, I thought I saw a headline, something about that they've authorized all the high schools in the state of Maryland to be voting centers.
So the last thing I had heard is that we're still going to have predominantly in person.
That's good.
Are they
Well,
going to?
I wonder
we're
if
going to
that's
be consolidated. The idea is we're going to be, we may have to consolidate election locations. I mean, the
But-
challenge is having enough election judges to be able
Oh.
to conduct the election.
By the way, here's a PSA for folks. If you're out of work right now because of Mark Elrick and the Democrats on Capitol Hill, you could get a job as a canvasser or an election judge, and you're paid. Canvassers, it's about a 3-week process. You get paid for 3 weeks, and it's more than $15 an hour. So I mean, it's better than $0 in the mail. So there you
Is,
go.
is
the-
the rule in Maryland, though, just to clarify, do you have to request a ballot if you want a mail-in ballot this time around? It's not going to automatically be sent to you?
That's-
That's
primary?
the plan. Yes.
I thought it was that they're sending you the application for an absentee ballot,
Okay.
but they're not sending out the ballots, which is smart in that there's like an actual
See, I
two-step
think you
process.
should
You're
still
not sending out.
request.
You're not basically having bundles of actual election ballots sitting around. To be there. There's actually a traceability in that, and by the way, the State Board of Elections, I guess this afternoon, evening, it
But-
proposed opening 360 voting centers statewide, most of them in high schools.
All right,
So-
Marcus. I think they should. What they should do is, show a little initiative. If you don't feel comfortable voting on election day, you take the initiative. You call the board of election. You tell them to send you a stamp. Why should we be paying for a mailing for all the voters in Maryland to get an absentee?
Then you have to have
Well,
enough people to answer the phones and process
right.
all that still at the same
have-
time. So I think there's a lot of voters, including many Republicans, who want to be able to do this, and they're looking
we
to
could set up a
facilitate that.
form online. They could submit.
No,
Yeah, and
Dwight,
and there's so many people who can't even like figure out how to do a computer. Like that's not a solution. That is not a public broad-based solution. And that's what you need with the Board of Elections. And so having it
I
mailed
don't
out
wanna go
and then doing that is absolutely
Wanna go
better than having bundles of ballots that are sitting next to a mailbox. And one thing we didn't, maybe somebody mentioned it, but yes, talking about the U.S. Postal Service, that just the Postal Service Union, endorsed Biden. So right now you're saying we need, like a normal election, you have bipartisan or nonpartisan election workers at a thing. That's the integrity of our electoral system. But yeah, let's do the Postal Service, which most of the workers union just said, we're endorsing this one candidate. Oh, but yeah, there's going to be really no fraud. What?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that, and again, it's not that most postal workers, that's not the case, because union leadership and like the average worker, that there's usually a disconnect between there. But still, that you wouldn't do that in a normal situation. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
By the way, have any of you guys noticed how mail has been a little sporadic? Some days you'll go a couple days without getting any mail at all in your mailbox. And do we really want the USPS to be handling our votes? Who basically, I remember
Well,
about.
but let me push back on that, Dwight. I mean, we have no fault absentee ballot voting in Maryland. So this isn't a big change. The only change is that the step of sending out applications, which has to be filled in and sent back. So I'm not.
Okay.
I hope you're not suggesting that we're somehow going to make it harder to do absentee vote.
My point is this, okay, in lean times, okay, everyone's saying, oh, we've got no money, there's going to be a shortfall. Why are we spending, even at a bulk rate, it's still going to cost them about 38 to 42 cents to mail those out to every Maryland registered voter. Now, in lean times, what if we had them send us a prepaid stamped envelope and then we could send it to them? It's like, it's... I think it's a good idea. I'm just trying to save the taxpayer some money here.
No, I would say the other big change, Mark.
I think you're pretty transparent as to what you're trying to do, Dwight. I'm sorry.
Hey, look, I do not.
I'm not going there.
I'm
not going to make any suggestions.
I do not apologize.
I'm just going to say one thing:
Mark.
Nassau County.
I am not. Again, I am for saving the taxpayer 50 cents to 40 cents.
Jackie, go ahead and give us a comment here.
Sorry.
Things that we need to consider is just like from the sheer quantity of ballots, is first of all going through the mail, the postage system, and then also obviously the counting and the check, supposedly, which they should be, which you're hearing in Nevada they might not be. There's pushback on that of checking every signature against what's on the voter registration. It's one thing where in years past where they've had couple thousand of those, and then another when you're having every single or close to every single person in the state voting by mail. It's just the proportion that changes so much of how many more after the millionth ballot are you still checking signatures, and that everything like that is the sheer quantity I think adds so much more risk.
And do they have the manpower to do it all, frankly?
The manpower, there's another thing.
And jobs out there, people.
Jobs, but you don't want some random Joe off the street coming in and day before the election. All right, this is how you count ballots. We don't know you, we didn't bet you, but we need help.
All right, let's go ahead and move on here because we're getting close to the end of the show. Let's talk about a couple of things here, and they'll just kind of work together. One are just basically presidential debates, and then also in relation to Joe Biden and some of his recent comments. So with the debates, just briefly. There's going to be 3 presidential debates. The first one will be right at the end of September. President Trump was trying to get another one in there, or at least get it moved up. And I think actually there was a good point to that in the sense that there's going to be some early voting taking place. So why not have this, kind of come in conjunction with that? The Commission on Presidential Debates rejected that. There's a lot of talk from Democrats about Joe Biden. Don't debate President Trump. They tend to use COVID now. It's not going to be safe. Blah blah blah, like this. But as we have seen by comments that Joe Biden has been making here over the last few days, there's a very good reason why the Democrats are scared of Joe Biden in a debate.
I think, first of all, the reason he's not going to Milwaukee is because they can't make the excuse of him not wanting to debate in person if he goes to Milwaukee. But all right, we'll let you go in a second, Dwight. But also, 100%, I think he gets up on a debate stage with Trump. I think that Trump could very easily sit the election that way. And to his point also about wanting the 4th debate, I don't think any state should be allowed to do early voting before any of the candidates have been able to speak their mind on a stage on a debate. I don't think it's fair to the voters as much as they think they know about both candidates, and Trump more so than Biden since he's been in office the past 3 years. I think every voter should be making an informed decision, and they're not doing that if we don't have the debates before they vote.
Okay.
How about if I play just briefly? I'll let Marcus go in here a second. A little bit of devil's advocate on that, and it's just that those that were going to cast their ballots early have already made up their mind. They were already solid Biden or solid Trump, and they weren't the undecided. That the undecided are going to wait and hear what the candidates have to say.
I think you're probably right there. Although part of me always holds out some kind of, you never know. Sometimes they're gonna listen to something and have a come to Jesus moment, like, oh my God, well, I was about to write down Joe Biden, and then I realized that this guy.
Jackie, are you allowed to say that?
Yeah, are you going to come to Jesus, Jackie?
Sorry. We've suddenly,
By
the
the way-
show has suddenly
yeah.
taken an evangelical.
But by the way, here's the thing. I think I know why Joe is not going to go to Milwaukee. And I don't think it's COVID or anything like that. I think he just doesn't know how to read a map. So he doesn't know how to get from Delaware to Milwaukee, you know.
Yeah.
We better let Marcus get his comments in here now.
Marcus,
Marcus.
I agree with. I think that's an interesting angle about. I didn't connect the not wanting to go to Milwaukee in conjunction with the debate. Like, so they're sort of setting that up. That's actually a fascinating concept there. Yeah, I mean, there's. I think I mentioned it before, but there's been the assumption for a lot of people supporting the president that, oh yeah, he'll just crush it in a debate with Biden and everyone will see. And yeah, that's an assumption that there will be in a debate. That's why when Don, you were introing, I was like, is there going to be a debate, or if there's a debate? Because I mean, okay, under the assumption that a lot of people think that Biden is sadly not quite all there anymore. If that's the assumption, then of course they're not going to want him to be completely exposed to, that's going on. So what are they going to do? That's a plausible path. And then you're like, oh well, I guess we just really can't do a debate, and that's really sad. And also along the lines of early voting, and yeah, because I believe the campaign said we want a fourth debate earlier because states are already going to be starting voting. And if you don't want to have 4 debates, well, just move them up, because if you want to do the mail-in voting, like a huge amount of the Democrats are saying, yes, we want mail-in voting, well, then you need to have the debate beforehand, don't you? And they don't really want that.
Right. And then Marcus, to your point about, oh, well, if there's a debate, I don't think the question is going to be, well, is there going to be a debate? I think is the debate going to be in person or over Zoom? And I think that it's even more dangerous. I think it looks really bad for Biden if he doesn't debate at all. It might look equally as bad as if he gets up there and makes an idiot of himself.
But I don't think they should
Wait. But equally, I think that the alternative to there not being in-person debates are debates over Zoom. And that's what's dangerous, because then there's pretty much a 100% guarantee that Biden's wearing an earpiece.
Yes, and he'll be like, what did you say?
Huh?
What did you say? Huh? Oh, so they're not black if they vote for Trump.
Hey man, why can't you vote for me?
So let me ask you guys about these comments that have attracted a lot of attention with Biden here this past week. One was this interview he was doing, and he was asked about taking a mental agility test, and Biden showing the great temperament of Joe Biden. So, he says, well, that's kind of like like taking a test for cocaine, and he says, are you a junkie? It's like, what the heck was that? And then this other thing that was prepared for the National Association of Black Journalists, where he made a statement that basically said, the Hispanic community has got this wide diversity that you don't see, with the blacks. And then he tried to walk that back, which I don't think worked at all. But is this not showing a problem, for Joe Biden? I mean, if you put him out there on the campaign trail, put him out there in public where he's not controlled, where he's not in his basement, is this not a huge problem for the Democrats?
I don't know how there hasn't been massive outrage by the black community with everything going on. Sorry, my dog is going crazy. Everything going on with racism in this country, systemic racism in this country, and cancel culture. How has Joe Biden not been canceled yet for these comments? Everything is, we need to end racism. It needs to start at the top. Well, hello, here you have your presidential nominee for the Democratic Party saying that there's no diversity within black thinking. How is that okay?
And plus he had that Charlemagne the God interview, which he's basically saying what? If you're not going to vote for me, you're not a Democrat. You don't really know what's. I mean,
Not black.
You're not black. I mean, are you not? I mean, have you not insulted the black community enough at this point in time? Why do they stay with him?
Culture. That's what I'm waiting for. Where is it?
Oh, cancel culture only comes to Republicans. I mean, I was watching something on YouTube where somebody was whining about how it was basically a Zoomer whining about CEOs and how these, as he put it, these boomer CEOs have no idea what is. And then there's a picture of the guy where he's standing next to the General Lee. He goes, he should be canceled for that. You know, that should get him canceled. You know, and blah blah blah. And here's the thing: it only affects Republicans. I don't think who was the last Democrat that got canceled. I can't think of.
Actually, that's not true. It really has come back to bite a whole bunch of people.
DeGeneres.
Yeah, ask Ellen DeGeneres about
apologize.
whether or not cancel culture comes back to bite you.
But well,
But
for
the
sure.
dad says he loves it when they eat their own.
Yes, it's
But-
it's fun to watch.
And you know the thing is,
Ask Harvey Weinstein. I mean, yeah,
They are. That's true. That's right.
that's
Yeah.
Bill Clinton's buddy, Harvey.
Let me throw one more thing into this mix with Biden too, because of also kind of the public appearance or interviews or whatever, is that, you know, he gets invited to have an interview with Fox News, but he sends his wife, in essence. I mean, he has Jill Biden doing the interview, you know, where she's like, well, he's a progressive. He's always been a progressive. He hasn't changed. You know, I mean,
That's
is this
another
also
thing he has in common with Woodrow Wilson. You know,
is this also something that's going on, that Joe Biden is going to hide behind Jill for certain things like this too?
I think Jill's been the brains of the operation for a while.
there's precedent for that. If you know
Woodrow
your
Wilson.
history,
Well, I think she was
there
the
you
one
go.
to run because I think she wants to be the Hillary Clinton to the Bill Clinton. She wants to be
She
the
wants to be the. I'm
puppet
trying to
master.
remember what was Wilson's
Edith
wife's
Wilson.
first- Edith, right?
Edith. She wants to be. Okay, let me tell you. America, get ready for the second coming of Woodrow Wilson.
Edith
Joe
Wilson.
Biden.
She wants to be the puppet master, and in terms of targeting him as a progressive, I don't think that's doing him any favors because and having the conversations that I have in my family about what's going on with the squad, which is a whole another show on its own. He said, I hate that they're all winning their primaries. How is this possible? How are people not
Well,
seeing?
they're in very liberal
And
districts.
my dad says to me, that works in our favor because then we can keep calling out how crazy progressive, like far left wing these people are, and that does not help you win moderate voters.
And here's something else about Joe Biden is the fact that one, I think he really admires Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson said and Jill really admires Edith Wilson. I wonder if they're going to do a screening of A Birth of a Nation if he becomes president. Joe Biden, wants to go back to the future of the Democrat Party. I mean, this is a part. Okay, and now this is one thing that really drives me nuts. The party of Jim Crow, slavery, and segregation has the audacity to say we're the racists. While we were trying to pass equal rights, Democrats filibustered to kill the Civil Rights Act. LBJ never would have gotten the Civil Rights Act through because he couldn't count on people like Al Gore Sr., who, by the way, the Democrats' defense of Al Gore Sr. is, well, he had to do that because his constituency. If his constituency really wanted him to vote against the Civil Rights, why'd they vote him out? And Bill Brock became the senator from Tennessee, who now lives in Maryland.
How about Kamala Harris is probably going to swallow her pride if she's the VP pick and sit there as the VP.
By the way,
and why hasn't Joe picked the VP? I thought Joe was going to pick a VP this week. I thought that was going to happen.
Don, the problem is I think he's calling people up on his Sesame Street phone, and he's saying, I want you to be my vice president, and they basically, you're VP? Are you,
Right, nobody's turning him down for vice president.
I think so. I mean, it's like,
because if he were to win, they would basically be president within the year.
By the way,
so that's an invitation to be
They'd be
president.
the shadow president or the president in waiting.
Hey, but
right?
here's a question: what happens if, hypothetically, no one's wishing ill on
anybody,
Joe Biden, but this is some things we got to think about. What happens if something, heaven forbid, happens to Joe Biden between him getting the nomination and election day? What if, let's say, he succumbs to COVID-19, or he becomes like.
I thought it was going to be darker than that. I thought you had some plot.
I think.
No, my point is, They have no mechanism. His VP does
Actually,
not.
there is.
What
We've been through this.
I'm
Yeah,
sure there's something written somewhere about what happens if a nominee.
there is a process. Both parties have a process for I think
But I thought
the
the
National
Democrats.
Committee.
Yeah, but it's
If
not,
you recall, this happened in 1972 with the Democratic Party.
yes, they did, and how'd
I'm
that
sorry.
work out for them?
I know it was before your time, but it was they lost their nominee who dropped off the ticket.
Yeah. Yes. And why did he drop off?
That's irrelevant.
Yeah,
I mean,
we don't
there
need
is
to
a
go
pro-
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, so we're at the end of the show. Shall we do one more thing and bring it home?
Yeah.
Dwight?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
so let's talk about the education, the reopening of schools from the standpoint of what has happened here. There's been a big battle locally for us in Montgomery County about private schools, public schools, about who could reopen, right? Montgomery County had issued an order saying that the private schools could not open up for in-person learning until at least October 1st. Montgomery County has voted that they're going to do all virtual, right, for the first semester. They canceled the sports, fall and winter sports. Governor Hogan came in. He didn't like that at all. He said that the schools should have control over this. This Travis Gale, the health official for Montgomery County, still refused to do anything. But I saw today that they have reversed course and that they are going to allow the private schools to reopen or do whatever they do. I mean, the private schools, they represent a fairly significant amount of students and a lot of things like this, but they're not as huge by any stretch of imagination as the public school system. And they were taking a lot of care, making a lot of arrangements to social distance and do all this type of thing. So yeah, this is a big victory, I think, for private schools. And I'm glad that something positive is happening in Montgomery County along those lines.
I mean, this made national news attention. It was like watching a tennis match. Is like, Montgomery County does one thing, Hogan fires back and forth, and the conspiracy theory I heard was, well, guess who goes to private school in Montgomery County? Barron Trump. Maybe this is Mark Elrich trying to show his hate for the Trump family, and I'm like, I don't think that's it at all. But I thought this was really interesting, and like you said, Don, I think this was a huge win for private schools, and and rightfully so. And people are saying, well, why are the private schools so special? Because there's less students and more space. They're all following CDC guidelines in order to do in-person classes, and they have every right to do that.
And I think what probably happened is that I'm not sure Mark Elrich had as much to do with it. I think they initially were going to push back on the governor's order, and I think they sat down with their lawyers and realized what legal authority they have to do anything in Montgomery County is derived from the state. And so if the state turns around and says, no, you can't do it, they don't really have a leg to stand on.
They kept trying to find a loophole,
and this is one of those things where it's basically it's the war. Basically, it's the war the Democrats have been waging against private schools for years, and this is kind of like their way of poking them in the eyes again once more. I mean, the fact that private schools are not getting any tax breaks for sending their kids to private schools, saving the county countless amount of dollars by
Hey, just out of curiosity too, with this ruling, now that we know this, do you think that there are going to be some Montgomery County school parents or public school kids that are going to try to find a way to get their kids enrolled in private schools?
Absolutely.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, that's already been going on for many months. People have been trying to, because a lot of the parents who've thought ahead about this and just reading the tea leaves and seeing where MCPS was, how they were treating the spring lockdown, how they were treating summer education, and being so, I don't really know. They have been trying to get their kids into instruction, in-class instruction, whether in a private school in the county or, I would say it's sort of like the same thing we're talking about in New York City, or moving somewhere that's going to have for people who can do that. And since everyone's working remotely now, why don't we just move somewhere, rent out our house and go somewhere else, rent our current place or go somewhere else where they're going to have lower infection rates and they're going to have in-person instruction in a more rural area. Like, people are moving out of the cities. I mean, in Montgomery County, our county executive is trying to, he's trying to be like de Blasio Jr. You know, like he's trying to openly compete with how progressive and et cetera that he wants to try to make Montgomery as far, you know, with the same policies that New York City is trying to implement. So yeah, people are escaping. I mean, as far as parents.
The other argument I heard about this was similar to what they've been saying with the SATs and why they made the SATs easier is, well, this is giving an unfair advantage to families that have more money and can afford to send their kids to a private school, whereas the students who are from lower income families don't have that option to just get out and go to private school.
But you know, the real secret on that is actually, you know, parents like the Whitman, Walter, they can afford to pay for tutors and so on like that, you know. And here's the thing. It's kind of like this, okay? People from the inner city do go to Harvard. You know, don't give me this nonsense. Oh, there's money is the solution. You know, if money were the solution, we'd be graduating Einsteins every single year and with zero dropouts. If money was this, because we have more than quadrupled spending on public education since 1972, which is a crime, and a lot of these teachers should be arrested and sued for malpractice. Frankly,
can you sue a teacher for malpractice?
No, the unions protect them. The unions protect them. But if we, you know, maybe there's a lawyer, Robin Ficker. Hey, how'd you like to take a case to the Supreme Court?
I thought that not local to Montgomery, but I believe I remember something along the lines of the charter schools and private schools, and it might have been a California policy or maybe a jurisdiction area policy where they'd say, well, you can choose to go to the public school or the private charter school or whatnot. But if you do that, then that money for your child gets diverted to that other school. And I believe at the beginning of the lockdown, I remember seeing some reports, I haven't seen anything since then, but some reports about how the state of California or the state of whatever was saying, all right, we're suspending the rule, like you can't just switch to a private school right now because we don't want to drain the public school system because there was like a mass push to go to these alternatives to the public school system. And that's, I mean, if everything's online, if everything's Zoom sessions, then what difference, why would you necessarily choose the public school over a private school if you can't go to your local school anyway? I mean, I don't know. There's so many different issues in this. So I'm
right, and definitely one that I'm sure we'll be addressing again as the months go by and the school year gets started. But
this fall is going to be a huge experiment. It's gonna, and you're going to see it's going to shake out what works and what doesn't. And there's a lot of sort of, I'm not gonna say pontificating, but like a lot of people saying, well, it's going to be this way. It's going to be this way. There's going to be mass infections. Oh no, it's going to be completely fine. It's going to be somewhere in between. It's not like it's without risk, but it's going to, if you think education is a vital function, if you think that education is essential and that teachers are essential workers, we'll see, because across the U.S. there's going to be enough diversity. I mean, the data worldwide leans upon open schools, but there's arguments, there are counter arguments to everything, that we're going to have that diversity across the United States. So I think we're going to really see which one works, and it's going to be obvious by November, December.
Definitely. And we're going to continue to talk about this in later weeks, but we do need to wrap up because it's already 10 after 8. So thank you, my lovely doctor. Yep, Dwight, what's up?
Yeah, I've got a final thought, you know.
All right,
What's
go
your
for it.
final thought,
Okay,
Dwight?
I want to talk about Byzantine architecture and what has gotten very little coverage these past couple of weeks, even on Fox, you know, in Constantinople. You know, there is Hagia Sophia, which has been, which is now, past couple of weeks, it's now recognized as a mosque. I think this is reason where we kick Turkey out of NATO, quite frankly, and Turkey we refer to Istanbul as Constantinople, and that is my final thought.
So we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Wait, we have more final thoughts. Come on.
No?
Extra innings.
All right, Marcus.
My final thought is just, I said it sort of earlier, but with the only caveat of landslide, the election night is going to be election month. We're not going to know.
100%. Mark.
It's going to be
Joe
crazy.
Biden is going to pull out of the debate.
Oh.
So I just want you to know that I'm channeling my good friend Marcus Elzona, who only last week, I think it was last week, right, Marcus? Only last week acknowledged that he was likely to be the nominee, although Dwight went into La La Land suggesting something else could happen. But sticking with that, I'm going to go out on the limb for the next couple of weeks that he's going to pull out of the debate.
I think that'd be the nail in his coffin, so I'd definitely put money on that. Don.
All right, I'm going to go in a different direction, and that is going into the sports arena, which is the Washington football team. As we know, the Redskins, not the Washington football team, they have unveiled their helmet for the upcoming season. If it will be played at all, who knows? We already had 66 players opt out of their season for this 2020 season, but they've unveiled their helmet. And some people have called it retro and whatever. I look at this darn thing and I'm thinking, like, it really isn't a whole lot better than a lot of high school helmets. So the cancel culture has just really done a number on our Redskins. This is just shameful.
All right. For me, we didn't get a chance to acknowledge what happened in Lebanon this week. So I just wanted, ending on a somber note, I know, but to say, that obviously what happened was terrible. We don't yet know if it was an attack, as the president suspects it was, or if it was on an honest accident. But, we feel terribly for all those who lost our lives. And obviously we're going to be seeing what we can do to help support the recovery efforts in Lebanon. But with that, thank you again for everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all next Friday.
Hasta la vista, baby.